listening to the 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast with your host, Peter Harris.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of 10 Questions with the Musical Mind podcast. I'm your host, Peter Harris. This week we welcome one of my longtime musical heroes, the man who introduced me to the fretless bass, the one and only Tony Franklin. Of course, Tony Franklin first came to prominence with The Firm, with Jimmy Page and Paul Rodgers and Chris Slade, going on to Blue Murder with John Styx. But of course, he was before that with Rory Gallagher and has had a tremendous career for decades as a session player and has appeared on dozens upon dozens of albums by prominent artists. So Tony and I get together, and this is a fantastic conversation where we talk about his playing technique, his songwriting, and some really cool unknown trivia about his days with The Firm and Jimmy Page, as well as some new news going on with his collaborations and upcoming touring possibilities with John Styx. So hope you enjoy this interview, and let's take it away with Tony Franklin. Hello, Tony. How are you today?
Peter, I'm good. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing so well. Thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So I've been listening to you for a long time, and so I've got several questions just based on your approach to different things in your career. One thing I want to touch on is in the immediate upcoming future, you've got a trek coming up with Jason Bonham, correct?
That's right. Yeah. Out for a month with his on his Led Zeppelin evening thing, end of June to end of July, and Jason and I go back a long way. We've known each other since the Firm days, and he has a regular bassist, and Dorian Hartsong, and Dorian had some other commitments, and so Jason called me for this, and I said, yeah, I would love to do it. That would be so much fun. And so part of it's going to be opening for Peter Frampton, and the rest of it is headline shows. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I bet. Now I can't help but notice the irony of this, that when you joined The Firm with Jimmy Page, you basically have said in the past you weren't very familiar with a lot of the Led Zeppelin catalog, and now you're with John Bonham's son playing Led Zeppelin. That's
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely right. I mean, it's crazy, really, especially in hindsight.
Right.
Circumstances led me to not know any Led Zeppelin stuff. I knew one song, but I never played it, and that was Zeppelin's Rock and Roll, which I loved. Tried to pursue more on the strength of that. Actually bought it. You could buy it as a single later, and it was on the B side was For Styx, which I didn't get. I was 14 or 15 at the time, and so it completely turned me off. And to fast forward, I hadn't heard any Zeppelin, hadn't even heard Stairway to Heaven when I was playing with Page in the middle of the tour. It was crazy.
That's insane.
Yeah, and so now, I've investigated it all during that time. I was given the whole set by Atlantic Records at the time, and it's like, oh, okay, now I get it.
Yeah, rock and roll is a pretty one-dimensional impression to get of them as far as their multifaceted stuff. But that is funny because For Styx was probably a bit of a fast-forward track for me when I was a teenager as well. So I can understand that.
Which I love it now. I
Sure.
mean, I love all the stuff. It's so diverse, and it's led me to. I mean, there's the difference between knowing the material and then really owning it. And one thing I've done a lot of study, especially of the early Zeppelin stuff, and just how tight and how much of a chemistry they had, and it came from just knowing each other and playing with each other a lot, and so that's the place I want to be. I don't want to just know the stuff. I want to really get inside it and own it, because Jason does a great job. They stretch it out like Zeppelin did, and they they really get inside the spirit of it rather than just doing faithful reproductions. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
I got you. So that partially answers a question I had. It was, how do you approach John Paul Jones bass lines? I imagine you want to stick to the spirit of it and maybe the important, hooks or fills that were in his bass lines. But other than that, do you sort of inject your own personality into it?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm doing it on fretted bass as the music demands. It's all about the music for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so the music clearly requires that it's a fretted bass, except for a couple of tunes we may be doing in My Time of Dying, which is on fretless. And God, I was looking at their 75 Earl's Court performance, and Jones is just tearing it up on the fretless. And so but the wonderful thing about them that I always loved is that it's different every show.
Right.
So yeah, I've got to do exactly what you said. I got to nail the important parts. But even I only recently realized, and this goes back, I don't know when they started doing this, but on Whole Lotta Love, he plays a very different bass line on the chorus of that. It's very different from the album that everybody knows. So it's interesting because some people will be familiar with that, but most people think of it being what it is, but it changed it up completely. So it's going to be I want to get into that spirit, but find that fine line where I'm expressing myself, but also really being true to the musicians and the music. So it's a fascinating process, and the only way to really do it is to really get to know the stuff so well that you're not thinking about that. You're just playing.
Right. Now, I've always loved your tone. As an aside, do you use a little more treble than other bass players, or is it a result of your mostly the fretless, or you know what I'm saying? You have a nice round tone, but it's not muddy. It cuts through. I guess you know what I'm asking you.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because it's changed over the years, and back in the day, I didn't really think about it too much, and I think I probably just had it wide open in the firm days. But I hear that wide open on the tone. But most recently, even on that same bass, I find that it needs to have some of the treble rolled off. In fact, sometimes it can be too much with it wide open. And my bass it's the stock bass that it's always been. It's my signature bass. It's which the firm bass, my original 77 one, evolved from that. So it's the same thing. But I find some of those highs a little displeasing. Maybe it's because mostly digital recording these days.
Could be.
It's you hear everything, you can hear all those nuances and all those, and it tends to be a little brighter and clearer. Whereas analog would kind of take that edge off it a little bit. I don't know. It's a very interesting thing, but I to me. And thank you. Many people do comment on my tone. I mean, a lot of that stuff with the firm, in fact, most of it was done DI, and and a little bit of amp. But I did a re-recording for my YouTube channel of a little bit of Radioactive, and I put some amp in there, and it's like that's not the sound. So I just had it all DI.
Okay.
And that was it. It was just perfect on that bridge pickup. Which I put in back in the day. I put in myself. It's DiMarzio pickup. I didn't know what the heck I was doing, but it worked. So it's interesting. All these things in hindsight, you just kind of go in with to just make it work at the time. You don't think too much. I didn't. You just kind of okay, that works. So if it's working, you're not gonna change it.
Sure. Don't touch it. It's working.
Yeah, exactly. It's not broken. So, but yeah, to me the tone is so important because for when I'm doing recordings, I have to get in the right vibe. And it usually doesn't take me long. It's not like I'm today's not the day. I sometimes have to use a different bass or sometimes change strings or just just change subtle things. But It's all I have to get the tone right, because once that happens, then half your work is done, and and there are different ways to approach how you play the instrument as well. I mean, there's so many subtleties with how hard you pluck the strings. Sometimes it's using fingers, sometimes it's the pick, and sometimes it's a different pick, different pickup configurations. And so there are a lot of variations, even though it's just a straight ahead bass, just two pickups and a selector switch. It's amazing, I find, how many variations there are, but that all comes from me as a player and how I'm approaching the instrument and how the tone and whatever, but the variables. But a lot of the time, I'll get the DI happening first, and then I'll make sure that that's sounding good. And but yeah, it's a fascinating process, and I've become more aware of it as time has gone by, as you do. Back in the day, I was just plugging in and say, "Oh, it sounds good." So. And it pretty much sounded good all the time. So, at least in my years back then,
sure.
Have I become more finicky as the years have gone by, more thoughtful? I don't know. But, hey, I'm still doing it. So that's something to be thankful for.
Absolutely. Well, talk about the firm and your songwriting. I'm always curious now I know you play multiple instruments, and that's one part. But when I hear somebody like, oh, this song is by such and such, and the example I'm thinking of is the song Dreaming. From the firm. Now, you wrote that, but I'm always curious, and I'm sure some listeners are too, what exactly that means. Like in the case of that song, did you pick up a guitar? Did you just map out the chord changes on bass or keys, or like say even the signature part of that is that 4-note pull-off riff that Jimmy does. And then do that a little bit of echo on it. Did you come up with that, or did you map out the song and then Jimmy came up with that? I mean, what were the nuts and bolts of what you came up with for that song? To your memory, I know it's 35 years ago.
Oh, I know. I remember clear as day. Absolutely every detail of it. I mapped out the whole song on a 4-track Porter Studio. And I played every part. There was a drum machine. So the drum machine, I clearly had the song mapped out in my head to be able to simple drum machine roll and whatever it was. It wasn't even an 808. It was a little tiny thing.
Right.
But so I clearly had it mapped out in my head to be able to put that down first and then lay the guitar down. I played the guitar exactly as it sounds. And here's the thing. So I was showing Jimmy the part, and we came to do it in the studio, and I was still kind of, because there's a lot to it. There's a lot of changes, a lot of subtleties and things. He said, "Why don't you just play it? Because you've got it." And so that's me on the album.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Playing his Strat, his 65 Strat, I must add, through his rig. So that is me playing the rhythm guitar. Now that's obviously him playing the lead.
Right, the B bender and all that, yeah.
Yeah, but no, that is that's me on there. So
funny.
All that's I came up with it, and I was very much influenced by Jimmy on it because it's the open G tuning, and definitely
even that backwards rate chord at the beginning. It sounds like something he would do. Yeah,
and it just flowed that way, and it was. Looking back, it's like, whoa, wow, how did all that happen? It's like in the studio with Jimmy Page, and I'm playing his guitar, and he tells me to play it because I know it, and so not that he couldn't have, but it's like the vibe was happening, and he's very much about the vibe. And if something's going and working, then it's like the same thing with what I was saying about the sound. If it's working, you don't fix it.
Right.
So it was just like, that is working. So you just do it. And he had no problem with that. No ego about it. It's whatever got the song done.
That's great.
And he is great like that. I mean, of course, he's well known for his production skills, and that cannot be underestimated. Just that what he brought to Led Zeppelin with his production skills, because they have such a vibe and such a sound, and if that was put into somebody else's hands, I doubt it would be the same. He just knew how to voice everything and get the best out of everything. But he was all about the vibe and getting that performance. Most of the firm stuff was done in first or second take, all live. So we were a real tight band with a great chemistry. It was a real privilege and honor to be part.
Now, have you covered that before, that you play the guitar on Dreaming? Is that known or in circles? I don't think I've ever heard that before.
No, I haven't said it too much. No, it's not been said.
That's really interesting. That's the kind of stuff, that's why I love talking to my favorite musicians, because it's the tidbits like that I just find fascinating. I appreciate you sharing that. That's great.
Yeah, and then, I did all the keyboards, all the backing vocals on it.
Right.
I had this, I was very, very, very influenced by Queen, and so those bits on the end, I just had this vision of that, and then "Don't Take It Away," all that bit in the middle. So it was, and Paul came in, did one take on the vocals. I mean, that was it, and so I didn't think I was going to get too many shots with him, because he was not totally sold on the song. But at the same time, it's this works. It works for the album, and so he came in and nailed it. So what can I say? I mean, both those guys. That was one take on the lead vocal. Everything was one take. Chris and myself laid down the basic track with the rhythm guitar and the drums, all one take.
Awesome.
And then I laid down the bass part. And then Paul came in. We'd all done that. We'd done that before Paul had come in and said, "Oh, you ever got the vocal on this?" And he said, yeah. So he just did it, one take. And then Jimmy's ready to do the solo, and one take. He just throws it down, and it was perfect. And
that solo is perfect. Yeah, it's just sort of meandering and kind of weaves like the rest of the song. It's a great, for a one take shot. That's fantastic.
Yeah, he said, "Was that all right?" That's all right.
Yeah.
I said, "That was perfect. Don't change it. It's great." So
that's great. Now, when you're playing, you play with so many different people. Who do you personally have to adapt to more from all the different scenarios you're in? A different drummer or a different guitarist? Like, what, playing style wise? Because obviously you have to be locked in with the drummer, but you also, you're known for your fills and that kind of thing, and you can't play fills or melodic lines the same way with an Eric Clapton style player as you can with an Yngwie Malmsteen style player.
No, absolutely. No, it's a great question. I've been very fortunate to play with very great players on both guitar and drums, of course. I find drums seem to just fall into place. It's never really been that much of an issue. I'm trying to think if there are players that I've needed to adapt to, but no, not really. Guitar-wise, not so much really. Stylistically, the one I had to kind of dig in a little deeper within myself was actually with Kenny Wayne Shepherd.
Okay.
He, so immersed in the blues, and we can all play the blues, can't we? Or at least we think we can.
Right.
So but when you really get into it, that the bass is a little different to what most people think, and it's really getting into that groove and that flow and that feel. Was not an instant thing for me. It took a little while, and I was with him for 6 years, so obviously it worked out.
Right.
But, yeah, that definitely. And Kenny's very clear on how he wants the parts to be, and all respect to him for that, because he knows what he wants. And so, I tend to be pushing and exploring and, well, whatever the moment brings. And Kenny's like that too. But there were different parameters. There are different parameters with blues music. So, but it's not like I was having to, really adjust how I was playing. It's more what I was playing.
Sure, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but generally, for the most part, I've not had to adjust too much. I mean, you get to certain drummers lean a different way. They may be a little bit more ahead. They may be right, and they may be a little on the backside. But as long as everybody's got a good meter, their own meter, it's not always about being on the click or the count. We didn't even have that back in the firm days. We didn't use that. But nowadays it's a lot more common. And so yeah, you just kind of feel people's own meter, and you get in your groove with that.
Yeah, I'm sure you get. I mean, especially back in the day when you were working with, Chris Slade and Carmine. At some point, they're probably like, "I am the click."
Yeah. Well, you have to be. I mean, I learned a very big lesson on my first professional gig. Two big lessons actually, and these are very, very relevant to players today and to myself. And that was I was part of a 10-piece dance band in Birmingham, England. It was called Pete's People, and we did 3 sets a night, and it was on the revolving stage. It was dance music and everything from 40s, 50s ballroom to the current pop and disco music of the early 80s. And so I was 18 when I first started that. And what happens when you get comfortable in a gig sometimes is that you start overplaying. You can start getting experimental and creative and pushing the boundaries of the music, which has always kind of been my style. I always like to do it. I still do that too, but you got to know the parameters of the music and the situation. So I was just kind of feeling my way with that then. And so anyway, the band leader, Pete, he turned around to me and said, "Hey, you're playing a little bit too much. You got to, if you can't stop that, then I'm going to have to let you go."
Right.
And I'm like, okay. So I went right back to the charts. It was all charted, and after a few months, you memorize everything. And so it's like, okay, straight back to the chart, and kept it as the music needed it. Very big lesson. And then not long after that, the drummer turned around to me and said, quite simply but quite poignantly, said, "It's not only the drummer's job to keep the time." And I'm like, wow.
Oh, yeah.
And so it's not only the drummer's job, it's not only the bass player's job, it's everybody's job, because it's not about, as I said, it's not about being a perfect on-the-click player, because some of the greatest ones are not. And so it's all about having that groove and that meter and that flow within yourself. If you're always aware of that and keep in your pocket, then whatever else is going on around you, you are solid. And the bass is so important to that, because it's like the heartbeat of the band.
Right.
But it's everybody's job, because if somebody's not thinking about it and they're just rushing or dragging or whatever, then it can just pull the whole thing astray, and it just doesn't feel good. So
it can turn to chaos very quickly.
Yeah, it just, as I say, it just doesn't feel good. And the blues is all about that. And it's not even about being. In fact, it's a lot of the time it's about the simplicity and the thoughtfulness of the notes, especially from the bass and the drums, and even the guitar, depending on the player. But it's all about telling the story, and you gotta have that groove, that feel. So that really makes you focus on that rather than all the notes you can play. I think it's become a little bit of a lost art, because people want to learn from me. They ask me, do I teach? And I really don't teach one-on-one. I do master classes. I have this True Fire instructional course out and everything. But a lot of the time, players these days want to know all the lead stuff, all the fancy stuff, all the tricks, and that. But it's not about that for me. It don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. It's been said before.
Right.
You got to have the groove first, and that you got to master simplicity and holding it down with a great feel. If you can make it feel good with just a straight part, dum 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 dum, or whatever it is, then we get people dancing and moving, and that's our job. So I don't know how you can teach that, really. You just have to make people aware of it, like I was very early, and then they got to just work on it.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, it's very true. Now, when I've watched old stuff of yours, I know you started off initially on fretted bass, and I know you still play some fretted bass.
Yeah,
But I was watching an old Roy Harper show, Glastonbury, I think in '82, and
yeah,
it looked
yeah.
like you did that whole set with the fretted Fender, tongue twister. Sorry.
Yeah.
At what point? Because within a couple years, you were with the firm. So at what point did the fretless kind of really take over as your primary voice?
Well, it was a gradual thing. I became aware of the fretless through hearing Jaco Pastorius,
Hmm.
and at that point, and that would have been '79. So I'd had it for a while, but it took a little while, and I cover this in my instructional course because one of the things I didn't have was a tuning reference, meaning that I wasn't playing with something to acknowledge if I was in tune or not.
Right.
All I was practicing at home by myself and thinking I was doing pretty good. And then, but if you're just playing by yourself, then you don't know if you're in tune or not.
Right. Then you get with something else and you're flat the entire that time, or yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Which is very easy to do on the fretless. So it's very easy to be out of tune. And so it was one of those gradual things. I remember taking it out on a gig. It was somebody who was a very great jazz vocalist, female vocalist. I think she may have had perfect pitch, or she had really good ears. And I decided I was doing it on fretted. Decided to do one on the fretless, and on the microphone, she turned around and said, "Get that boy back on the fretted bass." It was. I was not there. But something was driving me. I don't know what it was. I think I loved, which I still do. I loved just the subtleties and the expressiveness of the fretless, because you can do so much with it. Doesn't mean you'd have to be showing off or over exaggerating all the bends and that. It's about the subtleties of expressions, and
Right.
it's more human voice, so it's very expressive. And so I just kept it up, and at some point, and I think it was probably in '83 at some point, it all clicked. And that's having had the bass for 3 or 4 years at that point. And so it just all clicked, and then there was, good timing. The firm, well, we got together, as you know, with Jimmy Page and Roy Harper in the summer of '84. And we worked together, did a few gigs, did Roy's album, Whatever Happened to Jugular, did it all on the fretless, and so it was just one of those natural things. It just happened, and it's the only bass I took to the firm rehearsals. Well, I wasn't even. I was sitting in on the rehearsals. I wasn't initially asked to be in the band because they wanted to see how it all felt. It wasn't so much even about the playing. It was about just hanging with those guys, even though I'd done stuff with Jimmy at that point.
Sure.
He needed to see how I fit in with the whole thing. So yeah, the fretless was the only bass I took. Kind of crazy, really. I mean, if I was in that situation now, I'd take a few basses for options and all that. And but that's what I did.
Yeah, it's pretty bold. Now, how was adjusting to the vibrato on fretless for you? Was that a stumbling block, or did that come pretty easy for you?
No, it's. I mean, I've played upright bass. I have classical training, and my mum played the cello. My grandmother played the violin. It was one of those things that just seemed to be an extension of something that was already in my awareness. And so, yeah, but there's different kinds of vibrato too. You can more the classical kind, and then there's more the rock kind, and then you can have the wide kind of almost like tremolo kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of different subtleties, which is, I love all that. Because,
well, you talk about subtleties and the human voice. I'm not kidding, and maybe you've heard this before. I don't know if I'm unique in this, but when Radioactive was hitting the radio and all that was a big hit, there was a good while before I really sat down and listened. And actually, before I started playing guitar myself, I think your ears aren't trained enough to always pick out exactly what is what. There was a good while there when the Radioactive first starts and you start off with those sliding harmonics. And I actually thought when I'd hear them on the radio, that was Paul just going, like just kind of starting off with a little hum.
Yeah, well, it's funny because I hear comments about that quite a bit.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't really a sound that was heard, and you certainly wouldn't associate it with the bass. That's for sure. Right. Now, some people saw the video and they see me playing the bass, and then they try to play it on the fretted and realize, oh, you can't do that.
Right.
And so it was one of those gradual things that seeped in, and but it was cool, and it was it's funny because standing back and finally being objective about it, the Fretless was it was a perfect vehicle for the Fretless. The firm was,
yeah,
and it wasn't a conscious thought other than me just saying I'm taking the Fretless. They said nothing about it. They made no comments, never suggested otherwise. It was just I played the Fretless bass, and so they accepted that, but it gave the band a very different personality.
Sure.
In hindsight, and so which was great for them, because seeing them coming from their established bands of before, if it took it in another unique direction, which
right, made it feel fresh to them.
Sometimes can't plan these things. You couldn't say, well, why don't you do it on fretless bass, because that will give us a different kind of sound. You can't think those things through. They just happen, which is, to me, one of the beautiful and magic things about the firm and about music in general. You just have to be ready, and then circumstances come along with hard work and all that, but you have to be ready for it to see when things are right and when they do click. So
sure,
it's all very fascinating to me.
Oh, it is. And talk about being ready. I wonder, as a session player, are the days of walking in cold as a session player and reading charts and saying, okay, go, are they over? Like these days, like somebody's like, hey, I want you to play on this. Are you pretty much getting like, I'm going to email you the bed tracks and come in and lay down your interpretation of it? Is that kind of more how it works today?
It's pretty much, yeah. It's pretty much most of my sessions are that way. I think there's probably still a handful of guys that may do that, and I've done those sessions over the years, and they're exciting. They kind of keeps you on your toes, keeps you scared. It's scary,
sure.
But I love that. I do. I love that environment. But yeah, it's becoming a rarity. And I think there's, I say, probably a handful of guys that still do that,
right?
And, only because that it's not that kind of work. I mean,
right?
It makes total sense. I do a ton of sessions, mostly from home, and I'm thankful for it. I do. I enjoy it, and but it is what it is, and so I'm happy I came from that background though, because.
Sure.
I was fortunate I was able to read music pretty well from being a very young age. And so I had that experience of being in the studio and having to deliver on the spot. But at the same time, I can play by ear and listen to something and hear what it is and then come up with a part that is right. So, yeah, I'm just very, very thankful for all of that, really, my upbringing and my parents and how they trained me without even knowing they were training me, just right. Kind of by osmosis, really.
It's what I liken it to is with YouTube and all the ability for the internet to learn things so quickly, and it is a wonderful thing. But I grew up obviously pre-internet and all that, and just like yourself, I liken it to the artist. You've got the artists who go to art school and they immediately launch into, I'm an abstract painter and I just swirl paint around. There's a difference because the true masters were classically trained and they knew how to draw the human form and they knew how to construct realistic artwork from the ground up, and then they expanded into expressionist painting. They didn't just do expressionist painting because they couldn't draw. And that's the difference between having a classical foundation in any kind of art and then expanding on it.
Yeah, and people, absolutely. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. It's really, you got to have those foundations, the fundamentals, and And it's the 10,000 hours thing, which amounts to about 10 years. And so you really, ideally, and hey, we're always still learning. It never stops. I'm always checking out stuff and learning, and be it on the creative process, writing or playing or anything. It shouldn't stop, but you got to put that time in it. And there are so many amazing resources these days, like never before. Part of that problem is that it doesn't always become valued necessarily. We don't dive deeply into something. There are always those players that will, and you can hear the difference.
Sure.
And you gotta really respect and understand what it is you're doing. And so it's an incredible process. I was so very fortunate because I was born into music, and my parents played. They had their band. I was first time on stage with them. I was 5 years old, and then it carried on from there. So by the time I hit the firm at 22 years old,
you were a seasoned veteran.
Yeah. I'd already done thousands of gigs and different recording sessions and different experiences and everything. So all of it adds up, and there are no shortcuts from that. But you certainly can, if you when you're younger, that's the time to do it, because you have that time in the day to be able to spend 8 or whatever hours studying, and it's a wasted opportunity if you don't do that. And but players are coming up, and they've clearly put in their time. But I look back on it all, and it's like, wow, I'm so thankful for it. And by the time I was 13, 14, I was playing 3 or 4 gigs a week with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
And then at Christmas time, it'd be 3 weeks straight of gigs. It was amazing. Wow. Amazing. I mean, I don't know if that opportunity is available these days, because music and gigs have changed so much. But
right, I don't know. Yeah.
But there are different ways. You just have to. I think the importance is realizing the importance of it, of getting that experience. And even if you get together and jam and play with friends, and learn songs and put on performances that way, and be objective about it, and record yourself, and so you can get some objective feedback. Have some friends in there that come and watch. I'm sure some friends would love to do that. There's ways to do it if you're aware of the importance of it.
Sure. Yeah. And I think the truly passionate will find a way. So that always seems to stay alive. We gripe and moan about the death of rock and the death of back in the old days, but somehow it always seems to carry forward. So,
agreed.
Yeah. Now, I want to touch briefly, of course, we've touched on the firm a lot. My absolute favorite group by you was, of course, Blue Murder. And I'd be remiss to not touch on that. It's in my holy group of late 80s bands that should have been enormous, but because of the wave of the music industry, it's Blue Murder, Badlands, and a group called River Dogs.
I did a gig with those with the River Dogs in 93 or so.
Oh, great. Yeah, man, I love those guys. But anyway, so we're finally getting John, hopefully this year, back in action. And I know he's with Golden Robot Records now. Can you comment? Is it still slated to be you and Fred Boswell Jr. In the band if he tours?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we've been jamming together, and there's been delays just because of some business stuff and various circumstances. But John is hungry to get out there. He really is. But yeah, we've been jamming together, Fred, John, and myself, and it's been phenomenal. It's so exciting, and so we're in contact regularly, and just figuring out how to do this, because John doesn't want to. I don't want to just be slogging around the clubs of America or all that. It's like we have an incredible track record and history in it, and so it's about putting the right thing together and getting it out there in the right way, which is it's not always clear or obvious, but
right.
I feel confident that it will happen, but I ask the fans for their patience yet again.
Hey, sure. Hey, you know what? That's fine. You get more patient as you get older. But yeah, it's one of those things. I love those, and I hope most people realize that the second album, Nothing But Trouble, is actually mostly you on it, even though you weren't on the tour. It's mainly you.
Yeah, I played on 7 of the
Mhm.
track, so it is, and Carmine too. So
Right.
it's very much a Blue Murder follow up, even though it has a different feel. There's still some amazing stuff on there, so it's
Oh yeah.
different vibe and all that, but still worthy of people's ears.
Yeah, I followed you around for you've turned me on to some artists that I was aware of but never bought albums. Like I was aware of years of like Tony McAlpine. Had never actually bought one of his albums, and then you played on I think Premonition. It was probably like '94. I'm going off memory, but
Yeah, there's another one too, and I'm forgetting the name of that. Premonition and I forget but there was 2 albums. Yes.
yeah. But then I'd be like, okay, I've always heard this guy's good. I know I like Tony, so I'll buy that. And so that's the way I've always liked to branch out my music taste, especially before you could just listen for free on the internet, but you had to go and buy an album. But yeah, so you've turned me on to some other stuff I wasn't aware of over the years too. So, well, good.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. Well, anyway, I'm hoping that will come to fruition with John and everything. I know. Tell him, please pass it on. I'm sure he knows that a lot of us are patiently waiting, and we just love his playing and his singing and everything. So that'll be good.
Oh, a lot of people reach out to me about that, and I let him know, and he's aware of it, and he really wants to get out there and do it because it's rare to get a chemistry with a band, and as I'm seeing with the Led Zeppelin stuff, just how powerful that is. And so you play with players over the years, and I've been very fortunate to play with some amazing players, and but it's really very, very rare and elusive when you have a chemistry that is the tangibles are hard to define.
Sure.
It's like Zeppelin was, just the way they were like one unit, and it's so John and I have always had that, and we have it with Fred, and so it's very exciting. We almost feel like we'd be compromising ourselves if we don't do this.
Oh, good. Okay.
There's very much a feeling of purpose and focus with this, so it's very exciting. It really is.
Well, cool. Now, let's. Does everybody know where they can follow up with your latest news? What's the best place to stay in touch with your happenings? I mean, I know Twitter. Where else can people reach out to find out more?
I'm everywhere, and mostly under Fretless Monster. Twitter, of course, /Fretless Monster. Instagram /Fretless Monster. I have Fretless Monster Facebook page and all that. I have my YouTube channel, which is under Fretless Monster. So, and fretlessmonster.com. But
we should just decide on a name and stick to it.
Yeah, well, that's a whole story unto itself. But people come up to me, and it's like, well, I was on this blues cruise recently. It was run by Joe Bonamassa, and I never met Joe before until this. But I was playing there with a Texas guitarist called Monty Montgomery.
Yeah.
And who's not really a straight blues player, he's acoustic, but he tears it up. He's really great. So anyway, we were hanging, and then Joe walks in the room. Tony Franklin, the Fretless Monster. And so it's one of those things that's it's developed its own thing. And so, hey, why not? Just it makes it easy and fun to remember. So
sure.
And people have said to me, I say, well, that Jaco Pastorius was the real Fretless Monster. I said, listen, Jaco was my hero. He's the reason I play the fretless bass. He was an absolutely amazing player, and he stands in my highest regard. I respect him and love him so much, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing if it weren't for him. It's just a name. It's a fun
handle to make it easy to remember. That's all I take it as.
Exactly. I said it's not saying that I'm the monster of all fretless players above everybody else. It's not even about that. It's just a fun thing. But
well, you've got a fairly common name. I mean, if your name was Engelbert Humperdinck, you could probably just go on that. But it helps to have a moniker that you can attach to all your social networking sites.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very active on all those sites. At this point, I'm able to handle all of it myself, and it's manageable. And so anything that goes up there is put up there by me, and I reply and get involved. I love that aspect of it, and I'll always be involved. And hopefully, it won't get to the point where I have to farm it out to other people to do it, because I think it makes a difference. So
sure.
I'm very, very involved in that. So
yeah, definitely. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing you on the road sometime soon. If not with Jason Bonham, then perhaps with John further along in the year. But it's definitely going to be a goal for me. So I'm hoping to see that soon.
Yeah, definitely. I hope so. And hey, I'm going to keep going and getting out there as long as I'm able to. I love it too much, and I still feel like I've got a lot to say creatively. So hopefully, I feel good about the thing with John, excited about that, and looking forward to playing with Jason. You can see the dates on his website, Jason Bonham, and it's the dates between June 27th and July 20th are the ones I'm playing with him on, for anybody who might want to check that out.
Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, there we go. So
excellent. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Tony. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll talk again soon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay, you too. Bye.
Bye-bye.